President of OFSF, Ms. Binaifer Nowrojee.
Thanks to everyone for such a warm welcome and for having us at WITS. It's really, it's great to be here. And I'm doing a series of lectures that are talking about various issues around philanthropy, about our vision for open society foundations. And I wanted to do them in Africa. I wanted to come here and I wanted to do it with people who I knew would share my outlook, my vision of the world, and to hear also the reaction to what we are proposing at Open Society Foundations, because we are shaping our thoughts. And your reactions, your discussions, the way you respond to what I'm saying will help us to hone and think through how we continue our work. We are really, at Open Society Foundations, we're contending with the growing challenges of our time. And it's a moment that's both defined by profound urgency and also full of possibility. And for me, I see so much possibility here on this continent, and how we can harness it, I think, is really the issue of the day. So let's start with the challenges. So firstly, I don't want to underestimate them. We have climate change, we have rising inequality, we have doubts about democracy, we have eroding trust in institutions. And they're not isolated crises, they're interlocking systemic failures. And if we're going to solve them, we're going to need new ways of thinking and acting, all of us. And they're all critically related to multiple failures that we're seeing of the systems that have carried us for the past few decades. Failures of the markets, the free markets, failures of leadership of institutions, of theories about development, and yes, also the role of philanthropy. Some argue that institutional philanthropy, born from the same systems that have perpetuated global inequality, cannot truly address the societal issues while preserving the very structures that created them. And so, how can we change the house we live in, I think really is the challenge for us. There are questions whether the benevolence of the wealthy can coexist with the extractive, neoliberal, neocolonial systems that continue to marginalize the global majority. Increasingly, the world is seen as divided between narrow elites who profit from the neoliberal system and those who are on the receiving end of its blunt impact, whether through technology, artificial intelligence, financial tools, natural resource extraction, and the control of land, water, and food ecosystems. They ask, can philanthropy truly be a force for justice when it's so often tied to the very elites who've benefited from the status quo? These are difficult questions, but they're necessary, particularly for those of us who are sitting in philanthropies. Does philanthropy's future lie in continuing to operate within the confines of a broken system? Or can we rise to the occasion and become a catalyst to see a new way of doing things, a new system? If we look today at the scale of philanthropy's interventions, they're indeed impressive, and they suggest a global commitment to addressing some of the most pressing issues. And Open Society, over its last 45 years of existence, has done just that. We've worked around issues of human rights, equity, justice in all parts of the world. According to a global philanthropy report recently, 35% of nearly 30,000 foundations focused at least some of their resources on education. 20% of these foundations prioritized health. In Latin America, foundations stand out for aligning their priorities with the Sustainable Development Goals, especially around education, health, well-being, eradication of poverty, and provision of decent work and economic growth. But numbers are not enough. Despite these investments, institutional philanthropy has often fallen short Too often, it's imposed top-down solutions. It's sidelined the lived experience of those most affected by the crises of our time. It has sometimes placed an importance on the priorities of the powerful over grassroots insights and wisdom. It's funded projects, but not movements. It's created an industry of NGOs that have addressed symptoms, but not root causes. And this approach now is inadequate for the challenges that we face today. Our interlocking systemic crises demand careful, nuanced, and collaborative responses that are grounded in true partnerships. And these crises are also demanding from us a fundamental shift in how we think about and how we practice philanthropy. That doesn't mean philanthropy should go away. The spirit of philanthropy it's alive across the world, and it does offer lessons, but we need to be thoughtful. We need to be strategic. We need to be savvy stewards of these funds that we are responsible for. According to the 2024 World Giving Index, 4.3 billion people, nearly 3/4 of the world's population, give their time, their money, or help to someone not known to them. And those of you who live in Africa know every African is a philanthropist. Every single person is paying for somebody's school fees, is paying for somebody's funeral, is helping somebody. This is a continent of philanthropists. For the 7th year in a row, Indonesians ranked as the most generous people. The United Kingdom, by contrast, it fell out of the top 20 givers for the 2nd year in a row. In the wake of the devastating 2023 earthquake in Morocco, there was an 800% increase in the number of people who donated money for charitable causes. And there was a comparable trend in Kenya following the Gen Z protests last year that crowdfunded. And now you see in the United States the retreat from philanthropy and the way the US government has pulled out its aid in such a callous and cruel way. Across the global south, in a trend that's emerged over recent years, we're seeing a rise in giving, a widespread expression of our shared humanity in this part of the world, a shift towards homegrown solutions and self-reliance through local giving. It's the spirit of Ubuntu and the philosophy of this content that constantly reminds us, I am because we are. But solidarity alone is not enough. We must confront the structural challenges that loom ahead of us. The withdrawal of aid that we're seeing in the US and multiple European governments threatens to push millions into absolute poverty. And I don't think those funds are coming back anytime soon. But it threatens right now to exacerbate the vulnerability of people who are already grappling with the consequences of climate change, food insecurity, and conflict. This group of people are suffering from the enduring after effects of global financial and health crises. And who is bearing the brunt of this? Women, youth, rural populations. And yet funding for their needs remains dismally inadequate. We know that the immediate consequences of the Western aid cuts are going to be devastating because urgent life-saving programs have depended on this aid and have been cut without any notice. And already it's causing immense harm to people in desperate situation. And it's damaged the standing of donors across the globe and increased the need. Now, I don't want to sugarcoat it because the aid model was not perfect. It had flaws, it created dependencies, there were global north, global south dynamics to it. But it's a space now that we need to think about. If it's gone, what replaces it? And if we're moving into a new reality where international aid is not coming back, then let's start thinking of new models. Let's not just look to restore. Let's look at what's needed but let's look at it in a way that makes it sustainable for the future. So here's our challenge, people. There is a need for a new vision of Global South, development financing generally, and philanthropy in particular. It means we can lead the way. It means providing more than just money. We do need to offer resources that enable the infrastructure needed for lasting change to take hold. And this includes facilitating spaces for reflection, such as this one, strategizing, network building, to foster deep solidarity, sustained change, and long-term resilience, not just within a country, across countries, not within a region, across regions. We also have to think of a new global economic architecture. We can't live with the one we have anymore. It has to enable those most in need in the global majority world to access capital and blended finance resources required to engage as primary participants, owners, and beneficiaries of green industrial growth. De-risking social justice financing requires phenomenal innovation and foresighted actions. At Open Society Foundations, we're trying to do this. Maxwell and UNDP also trying to do this. We are beginning to start thinking in new and different ways. A new vision of philanthropy in our fast-changing world must, out of necessity, start with listening to the people who are the ones most affected, so that we can truly hear from the movements, organizations, and individuals who live on the front lines of the fights for rights, equity, and justice. Philanthropy has to move beyond throwing money at problems with small projects, and instead start thinking and imagining the infrastructure of lasting change. Besides listening to these voices at the coalface, we have to now amplify them, give them voice, support innovative solutions that have historically been ignored. It means moving away from funding individual shining stars to nurturing full ecosystems of collaboration and mutual support. And it means staying the course to enable small wins to grow into lasting victories. At Open Society Foundations, in my first year of leadership, this is what we've been trying to think about and do. I want to bring a different type of philanthropy, a different type of global philanthropy that is thinking about the global majority, that is thinking about different ways of doing things, that is willing to step away from what we've been doing, as uncomfortable and as difficult as that is, to make room for the new. It's not embraced by all. It's a difficult path, and it's a different path than what many of our fellow philanthropies are doing. We want to embrace the principles of Ubuntu: mutuality, self-reliance, collaboration, local knowledge, intergenerational giving. We don't come with all the answers. In fact, the opposite. We want to ground our work in humility. We know we don't have all the answers, and that we are shifting into an arena, standing alongside many others of you who are thinking creatively, who are reimagining things, and we want to listen not just to what's said, but also to the silences as well, to those voices that we don't hear, that don't have space, so that we can actually widen the arena to make room for them. It's not easy work. It requires balancing the old and the new partnerships. We have gotten out of some areas of work, and you can imagine how contentious that has been, because people are losing grant support. It requires navigating complexity. We have to consistently resist the temptation to default to our familiar patterns. And it requires us to be intentional in everything we do, to test hypotheses, to approach our work with humility, to be willing to learn from our mistakes. And it requires us to be present, not just as funders, but as partners in the work of justice. And we are very strongly, and have always been, of the view that communities are best placed to solve their own problems, and that our staff should be based in the places that it is working on, and with staff drawn from those places, and we have offices all around the world. That said, it requires us to confront some hard realities. That philanthropy as it exists today is often complicit in the very systems it seeks to change. And that real transformation requires more than money. It requires a shift in power dynamics. Because ultimately, if we are to be successful, we have to move power. And power never moves without a demand. We as funders must also be willing to cede control, to trust in the wisdom of others, and to recognize that our role is not a top-down savior. We are not here to save anyone. We are a humble partner and an ally in the work of justice. That sounds very straightforward, but in the circles and the office spaces I work in, it's a day-to-day battle sometimes to do this. Despite these challenges, we are committed to this path because we believe in the transformative power of collective action. We believe in the possibility of a more just and equitable future, and we believe that we want that the voices of the marginalized who are on the edges must be moved into the center. One where the solutions to our most pressing challenges come not from our boardroom, but actually are defined by the communities most affected by the challenges. The challenges are immense, but I have to say, I'm actually, when I move around and I meet people, I'm always inspired. Wherever I go, you find people who are thinking differently. And so the capacity for innovation, for resilience, for solidarity, you find it wherever you go. And so philanthropy has to seek out those people, those ideas, those new ways of thinking, and to really begin to start seeing how we can begin to change global philanthropy to be a much more truly global effort, that together we can build a future where rights and equity and justice are not just ideals, but can actually be real realities. Thank you.